come to the community, to come to the heart of Waterloo, to give us to ask them some questions and to have them come to us and share with us about their campaign and why we should support them as a candidate. I extended an invitation to all the candidates to come and be here on today. Bob Krause, Rob Hogg, and Tom Fiegen, and all three of them accepted. Patty Judge is also running for office. We sent her several invitations to come, and she ignored our invitation to come and did not respond to us. And so we're very disappointed with that, but we are grateful to these three who have come today. So let's give them a hand this afternoon. What I'm going to do is Dr. Michael Blackwell is going to be our moderator for today, and he's going to be in charge of asking questions, and he's going to open it up at some point later on to the floor, however he would like to do it, but he's going to be in charge today, but I'm just hosting the event. So at this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Michael Blackwell to come and ask that we put our hands together for him also as he comes.
Thank you very much, Pastor Whitfield, and let's show our appreciation to him for hosting this wonderful event. Let's give him a round. Now, what we're going to do today is I'm going to first just briefly say a word about each of the candidates, and then we're going to go immediately to the first general question. The candidates will respond, each one having 2 minutes to answer the question, and hopefully there won't be that much of a need for rebuttal. If a rebuttal is necessary, the individual who would like to speak would be given a minute to do so. And so we're going to start in order as they appear alphabetically from your right to your left. And I'm going to introduce each one very quickly. And then, of course, after we break to have questions from the audience, then we will proceed to have closing remarks by each of the candidates. All right. So first off, we have Tom Fiegen. He was born in South Dakota, and he earned his bachelor's degree in speech and agricultural economics at Kansas State University, and earned both a master's in economics and a law degree from the University of Iowa. He served in the state senate from 2001 to 2003 and has worked as a bankruptcy lawyer and has had his own law practice for the past 20 years. And he resides in Clarence. So let's welcome him. Next to him is Rob Hogg, who was born in Iowa City. He earned his BA from the University of Iowa, both a master's and his JD degree from the University of Minnesota. He was in the Iowa House of Representatives from 2003 to 2007, whereupon he won election to the state senate and currently serves in that capacity. Recently, he's written a book on climate change, and he resides in Cedar Rapids. Let's give him a welcome. And finally, we have Dr. Krause, who was born in Algona. He earned his BA in political science from the University of Iowa, served in the State House of Representatives from 1973 to 78. Under President Carter, he served as a regional representative for the U.S. Department of the Treasury, Transportation, and he was a commissioned officer in the Army Reserve, serving 28 years in the military, and currently he heads the nonprofit Veterans National Recovery Center. At one point, he served on the Waterloo School Board. He resides in Fairfield. So let's give him our welcome as well. So we'll start with you, Tom, and go down the road. Our opening question is, what does Black Lives Matter mean to you, and how would you begin to address the main problems that cause such a movement to germinate?
Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. Before I get started, I want to thank everyone here. I want to thank Pastor Whitfield on Carmel Baptist Church. I want to thank all of you. This is what democracy is about. The other things I want to thank the other two candidates that are here today. This is where you hear about the things that we have in common, which are many, and the very few areas where we disagree. And I appreciate you being part of this process, and I appreciate having Ron and Bob here. With Black Lives Matter, there are a number of things, and I have my oldest daughter that lives in Kansas City, St. Louis suburb, and we've talked at length about the poverty, the crushing poverty in St. Louis as a result of outsourcing jobs. And I believe the first thing we've got to do is we've got to provide economic opportunity for everyone. The second thing is there is a certain tension in the St. Louis area between the police force and between the minority community. It's not just the black community, but that's the one that's come to the front. And this calls for us to have more sensitivity training from the police. I think it calls for removing the military equipment from the police. Whenever I see the police with tanks and armed personnel carriers, it leads me to be concerned about whether or not we're really about public safety or about intimidation. The last part of this is, I think that all of us have to recognize that we're part of the community together. And one of the things I've seen in St. Louis and in a few areas in Iowa is that people start to think of us versus. And we're seeing some political discourse with the right, particularly with Donald Trump, about us versus them. And I think we have to be careful of our language. And I think we've got to talk about this as all of us as part of our community.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rob Hogg. I'm a state senator from Cedar Rapids. I'm a candidate to be your next United States Senator because we badly need Congress to work again for our people, our country, and our future. Black Lives Matter, period. And we need to address these issues, these criminal justice issues that are involved. I have supported in the Iowa legislature legislation we've not passed yet, but it is legislation that has moved forward to ban racial profiling. I have supported legislation to ban the box of employment applications. We have supported legislation and passed legislation for minority impact statements on any proposal to change Iowa's criminal laws. We can now get a minority impact statement that will project the disproportionate impact it might or may not have on minority communities. And we are now using that legislation to address the terrible disproportionality that we have in Iowa's criminal justice system. So there's a lot of progress we need to make. And here's my fundamental belief. My fundamental belief is that America is a better and a stronger country because of our racial and our religious diversity. And so I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be here in this church with Pastor Whitfield and Dr. Blackwell and all of you on Memorial Day weekend. Because one of the things that makes America a great country is our racial and religious diversity. We need to embrace it. And when you hear those voices that say otherwise, they are wrong. And that is why the stakes in this 2016 election are so high. We have got to have a successful election here because that man who is going to be running for the Republican Party is a danger to the fundamental belief that America is better because of our racial and religious diversity. I look forward to the rest of your questions. Thank you so much.
And I'm Dr. Krause. And I look forward to being your United States Senator. And it's great to be back here in Mount Carmel, even though I never could figure out the streets even when I lived here. So that's why I take a bite on that. But it was nearly about 18 or 19 years ago today, or not today, but 18 or 19 years ago, that I participated and spearheaded in breaking what was called the power pocket at the time on the school boards. School board members were elected district-wide, and they all came out of a 4 or 5 square block area on the west side. There was nobody on the east side that was represented on the Waterloo School Board. I spearheaded that, I advocated it, and the public passed the bill to create districts so that east side would have representation on the school board. And we're all better for that. From there we took a step to make sure that the inner city schools were modernized and rebuilt, and that was a big step forward. But in terms of Black Lives Matter, it's the constant scrutiny by the legal system. Driving while black has been a problem for years, and I experienced it myself with a child. I'm in a mixed marriage. I married a lady from New Zealand who's a Maori. She's a woman of color. And I've got a stepchild. And he got in some juvenile trouble with 2 or 3 other kids. They picked him out, took him out for questioning, sent the rest of the people home. And that is the incremental step. That's just one incremental step. But when we look at having about 26% African Americans and minorities in prisons in Iowa, and as opposed to their population of 2 or 3%, it starts with every little tiny change in this system. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move first to talking about economic inequality. Our first question is, why do we focus on improving the lot of the middle class and ignore the plight of the working poor and those at or below the poverty line? We can now start with you.
Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. And let me begin by saying that you often hear among Democratic candidates this mantra about strengthening the middle class, and that is a poll-driven line. It polls well, and so a lot of Democratic candidates say that. And is that we need a vibrant, full employment economy that works for all Americans, that in employment opportunities. And by the way, that is not cheap, right? That's going to cost money. But I'd much rather make those investments than pay the price of unemployment and poverty and crime and welfare and despair. So for me, this is a social justice issue. I will also say this, though. It's not just a matter of social justice. I believe the record is clear that it also works better. And that's why the economy under President Obama was better than the economy under his predecessor, and why the economy under President Clinton was better than the economy under his predecessors. So we have all kinds of solutions that work, that can create a vibrant, full employment economy. I've done some of these things in the Iowa legislature, hope to do it in the United States Senate. Invest in education, training, youth employment. It is wrong to have almost 3 million unemployed young people, which we had last summer. Americans under the age of 24. Almost 3 million unemployed. That's wrong. Invest in infrastructure. Invest in clean water and clean energy solutions. Raise the minimum wage. End discrimination in the workplace. Support workers. I'm pleased to tell you I've been endorsed by the Iowa Federation of Labor and AFSCME and Iowa Council 61, because like them, we share this view that we need a vibrant, full employment economy that works for all Americans.
The definition of living wage is what we're talking about here. And the definition of living wage is being able to work for a living without depending on SNAP, Section 8, Earned Income Tax Credit, or any of the other poverty programs to survive. And we don't have that today. The $7.25 minimum wage is only $15,000 a year. Depending on your income and the number of kids in your family, it's probably around $27,000 to $30,000 is what a living wage is in Iowa. So what do you do about it? In 2013, I was the first person to advocate moving to the $15 an hour minimum wage. And I still support it. It needs to be stepped to get it through, but it is the first step. It will create about a $25,000 income, which is close, but not quite up to the minimum wage. We also need to look at jobs programs. Summer jobs programs are so critical, especially in the African American communities, because we need to keep kids occupied, we need to get them off the street, and we need to get money in their pockets. We also need to make certain that the community college tuition is free, so that we have easy and open access for the minority communities, and we need to focus on jobs that will help elevate people so that they have a true living wage and can depend on that. Thank you.
Can I start by asking a question? Anybody here work for John Deere? Anybody here work for John Deere? Let's talk about John Deere and Waterloo. Not that many years ago, there were 12,000 people that worked building tractors here. Today, it's a quarter of that. 4,000, 3,000, fewer than that. The first thing we've got to do, we're going to talk about inequality. We've got to talk about the hole in our economy where John Deere ships factories south of the border where they pay nothing. The very first thing we've got to do is we've got to stop that money. We have to repeal capital. We have to repeal capital. We've got to stop GDP. It's the race to the bottom. It's the race to the bottom. Once we do that, then we can start to do the backfill. I have called for a new WPA. We have many high school graduates that don't have the skills to replace the baby boomers who are electricians and plumbers. We also have national parks and historic sites that are deteriorating. This is a way that we can teach marketable skills and restore the things that are declining in our economy. The third part, as these two gentlemen referenced, is education and technical training. I agree with Bernie Sanders. I think college should be free. I think tuition to private universities should be equal to the amount. You go to Wartburg and they can charge 28, and you and I charge us 12. You can apply the 12.
All right, we'll start with you now, Bob. Affordable housing is still out of reach for many African-American households. What types of programs can legitimately remedy such a situation?
Well, I think we need to do some kind of a credit balancing program to give a credit for down payments. Often what happens, and I deal with it in veterans all the time. I've worked with veterans to try to get them good housing. And one of the problems they have is often their credit is so damaged that they, for being in poverty, that they can't get a loan, even if they can get the 20% down. Well, they don't need it for 20% because they're VA. But the two problems are the 20% down and the bad credit. We need to look at programs, participatory programs, where you can do public works or do public service jobs that will give you credits towards getting that 20% down payment. I think that would go a long way to opening the door to homeownership. We also need to look at programs that will give workers and the chance to get loans, low interest guaranteed homes for home repair. We've got a lot of homes in the on the east side and near the downtown that are very run down that you can get for a low price, but they need a new roof, they need a new furnace, they need something that's wrong with those houses. We need to have a program that will allow owners and new homeowners to come in and get those things fixed at some kind of cost that will elevate the entire community. We have a problem that in an area like this where there is a lot of poverty, homes get abandoned and then they create a pocket of decay within the neighborhood. We need to target the inner neighborhoods, elevate them through identifying those houses, fixing them, and getting humans back in them. Those are some of my ideas.
Let me start by saying, in my day job as a bankruptcy lawyer, I see a lot of examples of people who have, as Bob talks about, low credit scores, and a lot of it is job issues, but it's also predators in the financial industry. We've now got banks that act like the mob. We've got banks that act like the mob. And my friends and coworkers in the bankruptcy business have stopped calling them banks. We call them banksters, as in gangsters. And one of the first things we've got to do about low credit scores and the minority community is we've got to stop that taking advantage of those financial predators. Let's stop the ripoff. After we fix that, then let's look at ways to help people to buy their first house. I think we need to do more sweat equity programs. We need to do more rent-to-own programs. We've got to, as Bob talked about, raise that ability to tap into that first home and to start to improve it. I think they're also how to make it something that they're proud of. And like Bob talks about, in a community or in a block where you have one house, suddenly that starts to reduce property values, and lenders say, well, I don't know if I want to lend in that block because of this house or that house. There's a practice they used to call redlining, and hopefully we don't see redlining in Waterloo. I know in other communities we do, and there's not been any enforcement of that. It is a problem. One of the things that Franklin Roosevelt talked about is everyone being a homeowner. I think we've got to come back to that goal of making home ownership a universal goal for everyone. Thank you.
Housing is a really important issue for people. It's one of the biggest parts of their family budget, and it's a big deal to have not just housing, but excuse me, but to have quality housing makes a real difference in a family's life and a community's life. I will tell you, in my experience in the Iowa legislature, one of the things that has really made a difference was, especially after the flood of 2008, when, as you may recall, in Cedar Rapids, we lost about 5,000 homes. And I know in North Cedar, there were a lot of homes lost here, St. Susie, other places. Big deal. Well, one of the things we've been able to do is using federal financial assistance in Cedar Rapids, is we've been incentivizing the construction of new, quality, affordable housing throughout the urban core of Cedar Rapids, and it has really helped with the revitalization of our community and the recovery from the flood. One of the things I like about new housing construction is it's jobs now, creates jobs now, but it lays the foundation for long-term economic prosperity and community well-being. And I see the role of the federal government is not dictating to local communities how these things work. I believe the federal government needs to be a partner with helping communities achieve their own ends. And that's what you don't see much of anymore out of Congress. I know Cedar Rapids is asking the federal government for flood protection assistance. And you know what Senator Grassley told us? I don't do that. Those are earmarks. I don't do them. Well, we need assistance from the federal government on that. Not 90% like the Duke got 45 years ago. We're trying to get 18%. So it makes a big difference. I am somebody who believes fundamentally in investing in infrastructure. And unique among the candidates in this field, I've been there to vote for road infrastructure. I've been there to vote for school infrastructure. I've been there to vote for water infrastructure. I've been there to vote for our housing programs that we have in the state.
All right, we'll start back with you, Tom. We'll move to the subject of the topic of education.
I'd like to look at it for Tom.
And the other thing, Dr. Whitfield, I'd like to talk briefly about housing for just a second before we move on to education. May I have an opportunity, and I can hand the microphone then to Bob Krause? Please.
All right.
Right. Folks, I went through the flood of 2008. Many of my clients went through the flood of 2008. Here's a problem I've got with the housing program financed by the federal government. It only helps the developers. In the time check area, I had homeowners go to FEMA and say, will you loan me money to rebuild? FEMA says no. We'll buy your house, we'll sell it to the developer. The developer will then get tax credits and federal dollars to rebuild. Why is it only the well-connected developers get federal money? Why is it they get to make money off of rebuilding a home and the homeowner doesn't? One of the sad things about the federal government is they hand out money to rich people. Rich people get economic development money to rebuild homes, not the people who live in those homes. And we end up then renting from some developer who's got a connection to the federal government. That was a problem with the Cedar Rapids program.
Just a challenge to Rob's statement that he was the only person that had really done infrastructure. I've been a transportation expert for a long time, and actually passed a bill, put it together and got it passed in the Iowa legislature as chairman of the transportation committee for the 3-cent gas tax, which at the time was one of the largest infrastructure bills ever passed in Iowa. And I did a lot on railroads. I don't think the short line that runs through Waterloo, that what used to be part of the old Rock Island, would be here had I not worked with the Carter administration on that. So yeah, I've done infrastructure too.
And I just want to apologize for Bob for omitting that. I apologize for that. I should have said recently, but yes, I understand that. I do want to say something else in response. You know, we worked with homeowners throughout Cedar Rapids, just like I know the state worked with homeowners throughout Black Hawk County who were adversely affected in the flood. And thank God we live in a generous country that provided every one of those homes, people who lost their homes, up to the maximum of $28,800 in FEMA assistance. Thank goodness we had a Democratic legislature and a Democratic governor who could provide jumpstart assistance. And you know, we worked with people to get them back in their homes. And that was one of the most successful things we did. And you know what? I'm not somebody who believes we should badmouth the developers who also help bring our communities back. I think this is something where we need to unite people and work together rather than dividing people. That's the way you move a community forward. That's the way you move a state forward. That's the way you move a country forward.
All right, now moving on to education. For a variety of reasons, there's an academic achievement gap between blacks and members of the dominant culture, so to speak. In what ways can this chasm be significantly narrowed?
There is a gap, and the gap, I believe, is in part to two problems: resources and help for family members. One of the things that Bob was talking about, and I just want to echo here, is that when we have single-parent households, there is not enough time to read to the child, there's not enough time to help with homework. And one of the things we need to do with single-parent households is we need to provide them more support. Support in terms of the daily activities, support in terms of education for their children. More broadly, within our communities, we have very wealthy school districts where they don't lack for anything. Every child has a computer, a library is all stocked. When you come to rural communities like North Cedar or like East Side and Waterloo, we don't have those resources. And part of that has been the structure has always favored the districts that have a larger tax base. And we can't change that tax base quickly, but we can change the school funding formula. That's a state issue. One of the things the federal government should be doing is it should be coming to those districts that have the smaller, poorer tax bases and supplementing it so that they're on parity with the wealthier school districts. That's something, when the federal government puts in a mandate like No Child Left Behind, it doesn't send money, it hurts those districts that start off a couple notches below. I support the Common Core as a replacement for No Child Left Behind, but I believe the federal government should send money, appropriate money, to help districts to achieve those Common Core goals.
Well, I consider education the foundation of our democracy, the foundation of our economy, and the foundation of our future. Education is essential from preschool all the way to college and job training. And if you were to roll back the clock in 2002 and ask why did I run for the Iowa legislature, I would have told you because of education, environment, and fiscal responsibility. We have a significant opportunity gap in our schools in this state. And it's true in Cedar Rapids, and I know it's true statewide, that we need to address because every young person deserves every opportunity to succeed. And I feel this very strongly. I feel it's a matter of social justice for me. And, you know, we've made a difference in the Iowa legislature. We passed preschool funding, right, so that we had a preschool program. Thank goodness we had the Senate Democrats this year to say that 2% wasn't enough, and what we didn't get as high as we would like, but we got to 2.25%. We've had accomplishments for STEM education, math and science, and providing those opportunities statewide. And of course, I'm a big believer in arts education, put the STEAM in STEM. So what's the federal role in this? Well, number one, Head Start, critical, we should expand that. Number two, actually fund special education. That's been talked about for decades. Senator Grassley's never gotten that done. The Title I program, support them. And then finally, career and technical education. And let me say one other thing. In the Iowa Senate, we have tried repeatedly to improve our preschool program. We've passed legislation that would add supplemental funding for children who are in free and reduced lunch, because that's important to give a boost to those school districts that have higher poverty rates. Iowa House of Representatives won't do it, which is why it's so important that we get Gary Kroger elected in Cedar Falls and we take back the Iowa House.
I learned a lot when I was on the Waterloo School Board about education. And in spite of the fact that I had some back and forth debates with Superintendent Schwarzenegger, who has an interesting enough name that I think most of you remember, he told me when I got on the board that the most important predictor of academic success was the socio-economic status of the parents. In other words, what we do in the classroom, yes, it's critically important, but it's more critically important to have the head start of the family stable in order to make that happen. And you can look at what's going on with free and reduced lunch. That program, 42% of our children are eligible for it in Iowa today. And it's because their parents don't make enough money. And I heard many stories when I was on the Waterloo School Board about kids moving 2 and 3 and 4 times to different elementary schools because their parents were stringing minimum wage jobs together. We need to elevate parents' incomes in order to save the children. There's kids on reduced lunch score 20 points less on their standardized tests, and more importantly, their IQs go down 13 points, and that's permanent. We cannot fix the educational problem without tackling the income problem that is behind it. And those are the children here in Waterloo. Des Moines, I think, is about 73% free and reduced lunch. I'm not sure what Waterloo is. Does somebody have a number? It's high, I know that.
69.
69? Okay. So, yeah, you've got a crisis here. And it has to do with the incomes of the parents of the children in school. Thank you.
Okay, we'll begin with you, Rob. Why are disproportionate numbers of persons of color sequestered into special education or low-level classes?
Well, look, I think this goes back to the some of the problems that Bob was just talking about in terms of the socioeconomic conditions of parents. But I'm more interested in talking about what the solutions are. And to me, the solutions are, number one, you have a vibrant, full employment economy, right? You do that, education, training, infrastructure, youth employment, clean energy solutions, clean water solutions. But then we really got to make sure that we're making sure that our schools and our educational systems reflect the diversity of our country. And so that we've got people working in the schools so that people get the support they need, right? We need to uplift everybody. We need to overcome the achievement gaps. And so you start with that strong economy. You follow up with a belief that you've got to start an early childhood education and make those investments. And that's why I'm so proud of our efforts in the Iowa legislature to create the preschool program. I wish we had partners in the House that would allow us to improve that. It's why the federal government's role through Head Start and other programs is so important. And you've got to make those investments, and then you have to have a healthy, inclusive learning environment for all the young people in the schools. And that includes having schools that reflect the diversity of our country, and make sure every young person gets every opportunity they want. We need, in special education, we have something called individual education plans, right? Well, I think every student should have an individual education plan, because every student's different. I was an active volunteer in my kids' schools when they were little. And, I'd go in and read with the kids or work with math on them. And I'll tell you what, every one of those kids needs to experience success and be given every opportunity for success, and then build on that success. And what we do when you talk about class sizes that have 29 or 30 or 35 kids, it makes it much harder to do that. That's why we need to invest in education.
The special education crisis for minorities starts before they get into school. 70% of the intellectual ability of a child is fully developed by the time they're 3 years old. 70%. If you fail between birth and about 4 to 5 years old, you have failed. And what we mean for special education is that 13% I was talking about on the IQ. How do they get that 13%? They have parents that stimulate them because they have the time to stimulate them. They hug them. They have the time with them. They spend time with them. But if you're in poverty, you don't have that time. Talk about a thing in college, many of you probably have heard about it. It's called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The top is everything is so good, and the bottom is survival. When you're at minimum wage, when you're unemployed, when you're trying to string jobs together and get food on the table, getting food on the table is number one, and a shelter over your head is number two. And after that, if you've got time for your children, that's number three. And we force that special education paradigm on minority children because of the poverty. We also force it upon them because of stereotypical actions. Somebody will say, well, they're a minority. There's a subliminal thing, just like in law enforcement, that, well, we need to look at this child. And that's what happens. So you got two things hitting it. You got incomes and poverty, and you've got stereotyping. Those are the two bad things I think we're fighting.
Let me start by saying I agree with Bob on economics. I bring a little bit different background. My younger brother Tim is a PhD at special ed, and he works at a university school where the children he has have a, quote, criminal record, to the extent you can have a criminal record as a 11 to 12-year-old, and they have a learning disability. And my brother Tim tells me that it starts with the culture of the faculty and the administration. That if the teacher working with that child does not have support from their principal and the higher-ups, they're more likely to send the kid out of the room and have them go somewhere else and be segregated. The next thing is, in many school districts, if Johnny gets the reputation for being the one that acts out in the class, Johnny gets sent out and Johnny gets segregated. And my brother said, what you need to do is you need to have that individual attention, and you've got to have a teacher who can look beyond simply the record and say, what's going on in Johnny's life? Why is he doing this? And from a federal level, what can the federal government do to make sure that the teachers have the right attitude and the administrations have the right attitude? And I think that's funding for the special education, it's funding for the children that are at risk so that they get that individual attention. And frankly, that we change the culture so that everyone recognizes that every one of these children are unique creatures of God, and they're entitled to the rights of everybody else.
All right, we're going to move on now to criminal justice area. And most of us would agree that the war on drugs has not been very successful. And of course, that has led to the mass incarceration of persons of color, particularly African-American males. What do you think is the next step that we should take to deal with substance abuse, and even going to the point of the decriminalization of drugs or the legalization of drugs? What is each one of your viewpoints on this issue?
Well, there's no doubt that drug involvement as teenagers is a big issue. And some of it is simple. It will be taken care of if we can do the medical marijuana, where we lower marijuana from a Schedule I drug to a Schedule II drug. Because of the way the federal laws work, because it's a Schedule I drug. If you get caught, it's automatic hard time. It's a scheduled drug known to be evil or something like that. We need to knock that down. We also need to look at the mandatory 3 strikes you're outlaw. We need to do a lot more juvenile juvenile programs. We had Toledo for a young woman. That was knocked out. We still have by Governor Branstad, we need to have better facilities. We're starting to warehouse kids, and it's really ratcheting up the incarceration rate and the recidivism rate. We need to have better juvenile structures. We need to decriminalize, as you say, by reducing the schedule. It'd still be a crime, but it wouldn't be a hard time crime. We need to look at training of police at every level to the sensitivity of what they're doing to make them aware that they are actually discriminating when they do investigations and arrests. The guilty of driving while black, that is a real thing. There's probably people in this room that have had that experience where you're just driving along and all of a sudden you're picked up. I know personal friends have had that happen in different communities. We need to sensitize them, and we need to sensitize each level of the court system for the same reason.
First of all, I would decriminalize marijuana. I would take it off Schedule I. Second thing is, with regard to drugs, let's treat it as a public health issue, not a criminal issue. We need to spend more money on treatment rather than warehousing people, as Bob mentioned. We've got 2.2 million people in prison. But the next thing is, I would also take away the incentives to imprison people. Let's stop using private prisons. The private prison system is some of the largest contributors to corporate PACs and the legislators, so that we build more private prisons and we hire them. Let's end that practice to take away that incentive. The last thing, in terms of mandatory minimums, we actually repealed those a number of years ago, but we've got judges that act like the mandatory minimums are still there. My answer to that is fewer federal prosecutors becoming judges. I don't do criminal law, I do farm bankruptcy, but I've had a couple of farmers that made some mistakes in judgment that ended up having them be a prosecutor for felonies. When I went with them and their criminal lawyer to court, it was 2-on-1. The judge, the former prosecutor, acted like a prosecutor. One of the ways that I believe that we can end Christopher County is start appointing judges from a more varied background, so that we have judges that are truly umpires calling strikes and balls, not partnering with the prosecutor to send somebody away and throw the book at him.
Well, first of all, just would remind people that a lot of the war on crime legislation from the national level was supported by Senator Grassley. And I know last year Senator Grassley unveiled a criminal justice reform bill with a lot of fanfare. Some of you may remember that. But to this date, it still hasn't been passed by Congress. And, you know, when you've been in Congress for 42 years and you're unable to get something passed, Mike calls into me the question, can you still get the job done anymore? And everybody who's talked to me about that has said it's relatively weak what he's trying to do. In the Iowa legislature, we passed on a bipartisan basis this year legislation to reduce the mandatory minimums for certain drug offenses, to cut those back. It's expected to have a very positive impact in terms of reducing the disproportionality in our prison system. And so that's progress. Let me talk just a moment more broadly about the issue. I do strongly believe that we do need to treat substance abuse as a public health problem. Last year I visited the Mental Health Institute in Mount Pleasant that had the state's only dual diagnosis program, where they treated people with mental health conditions side by side. The same people also had substance abuse counselors there for them. I met two men who said that for the first time in their life, after doing that 30-day program, they understood what led them to use.
This is a big problem in my bankruptcy practice. I will tell you that 75% of the Iowans who file for bankruptcy because of medical bills. People cannot afford the care that they need. The federal answer to this is Medicare for everyone. I agree with Bernie Sanders. The answer to this is Medicare for everyone. The other problem that people have, not just in the African American community, but in rural communities, is prescription drug costs. Anybody here taking prescription drugs? Are they expensive? They're crazy expensive. Our friend Chuck Grassley passed something called Medicare Part D, which prohibits Medicare from negotiating prescription drug prices. I've got clients that are also in the VA. Their cost for those drugs in the VA is 10 cents on a dollar compared to what they pay for Medicare. First thing I want to do for prescription drugs is repeal Medicare Part D so that Medicare can negotiate just like the VA on drug prices. Does anybody here want to continue paying high drug prices? No. Some specific things is, let me just go back to rural communities and to African American, is also access to providers. You know, in my little town, we don't have a doctor. The nearest doctor is in Cedar Rapids. In the minority community, a lot of times, there's not access to primary health care. The federal government has made steps in that direction. The Affordable Care Act did not do enough. One of the things we've got to make sure is that in rural communities and communities with poverty, there's access to primary care providers to treat the problem before it becomes an emergency room visit.
Government's role on health issues is actually really quite important. In my years in Iowa legislature, and I see former Representative Don Schultz here, who was there in 2007, when we passed legislation to add 60,000 kids in the state to the Hawkeye program. We did that, right? We added that. We were there, we were going to make that vote, we were going to get that done. I was there when we passed the smoke-free law. I believe that was 2008. Representative Schultz, I believe you were there still, when we did the smoke-free law, right? And that was important. In 2013, we were able to add 150,000 working Iowans in divided government. We were able to get that done under the Medicaid expansion program. And that makes a real difference in people's life. Now, is that perfect? No. But that's all tangible progress towards the goal of making sure that every American has access to health care. I've been a strong supporter of substance abuse prevention and treatment. I've been a strong supporter and advocate for mental health treatment. We need government to continually make progress on this idea. What's Congress doing? How many times have they voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act? 60? Something like that? I mean, that's ridiculous. Let's move forwards on these issues. Now, so I'm a very practical person. I want to make progress on these issues. And so let's work together and try to make sure we get to the day when everybody has access to affordable health care. Whether that's improving the Affordable Care Act, whether it's a single-payer system that we actually make work. By the way, remember, transitions in the health field can be pretty bad. Governor Branstad has demonstrated it with his mismanaged Medicaid managed care mess. Awful deal done for private companies. So let's work together and make progress on these issues.
Well, Tom's absolutely right on what Senator Grassley did by prohibiting the price of prescription drugs. And it is even more massive than pills. Well, the total cost since Senator Grassley passed that law, the total cost of the Iraq War, that's a huge amount of money. And it came out of a very selective population, as it usually is. In terms of the minority community, I think that things tend to fall in categories. And one of the big ones in the past for African Americans was sickle cell anemia. And they've developed tests to try to get that identified quickly and early. That has to be, and more advertising needs to go into categorical programs like that. That's a categorical program. Because of the cultural impact with African Americans in the South, they tend to eat more salt. They tend to eat more things that will cause heart problems, and those are issues. And when we look at the big picture of what's going on, we realize that the people that are actually getting an increased lifespan from all the wonders of science that we have are the upper echelon, that top 10%. In other areas, we're behind the curve. And people say, well, lifespans are going up, so we should take Social Security away from those that are 65 or 66 and 67 and 68. We should not do that. Pardon me. Sir, pardon me. Came at the wrong time. I lost my train of thought when that happened, obviously. But we need more categorical health programs, is what we need, to identify and focus advertising that they can go in and get a checkup and identify these things. We don't do hardly any outreach, and we need to do outreach to get people aware of what's going on.
All right, I will ask one more question again with you, Rob, and that is, and then we'll proceed to some questions from the audience, followed by closing remarks by each one of you. All right. We hear a lot about campaign finance reform. What does that mean to you, and how are you evincing that in your campaign?
Great, thank you, Dr. Blackwell, for the question about campaign finance reform. We have a very serious problem with how campaigns are financed in this country. And that is more clear to me now that I've been a United States Senate candidate than ever before. Why? Because when you run for the State House of Representatives, guess what? You can knock on every door. And I've done that. I've won 5 elections in a row. I've replaced Republicans twice. Each time, I've had a bigger margin than the previous time, right? But when you run for the United States Senate, it's different because you're dealing with statewide. I can't knock on all million doors across the state as much as I'd like to. So here's the challenge. When I announced my candidacy last September, Senator Grassley already had $4 million cash in his campaign bank account. $4 million. Now maybe it's because my dad was a math professor and a statistics professor. I figured it out. Municipal employees are great public sector labor union. And I'm glad they have received that. And we are going to assemble the resources we need, knowing we're going to get outspent, but we're going to outwork them, we're going to inspire people, we're going to uplift our democracy, and that's the way you can win despite the $4 million head start that Senator Grassley had.
Well, if you look at $1 Million Men, you need to look at Jeb Bush, too. This is a historic time when I think because of the social media inventions that have occurred over just the last couple of years, where the man behind the curtain has been revealed. And we realize that there is no Wizard of Oz. There are only humans, and they are taking away our democracy by the vast amounts they spend. So what we need to do is we need to go against Senator Grassley, who as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee has strongly defended Citizens United, which basically opened the floodgate to more and more campaign contributions. He is the fellow that wants to stop the repeal of Citizens United by the Supreme Court by stopping the nomination of Judge Garland. He wants to retain that control. That's what he wants to do. As for me, I have not had any PAC contributions from any source. I've had a number of small contributions, and I have self-financed. But I have gone to the people every time through social media, and I have one of these, or go to YouTube at Krause for Iowa, for U.S. Senate, and you'll see my efforts. Look at them. I've got a lot of little videos on there. Take a peek at them. They're free. What you can do to help me is push the share button and send those out to your friends.
Can I ask you guys a question? Is anybody here got a PAC? Does anybody have their own political action committee? Anybody? Here's the problem. Chuck Grassley and everybody in D.C. and a lot of the people in only listen to you if you've got a PAC. you can give them money. And one of the things that I have visited with the pastor about is this is a new form of racism, because elected officials say, unless you give me money, I can't hear you. That's a problem. I am refusing PAC money. I did take PAC money with the state senate, and I will tell you, when I was in the state senate, when we went into closed doors, there were always two questions. The first question was, what's the right thing to do? But before that question even landed, the second question was, who gave us money? I got to tell you, as a Democrat, when you take PAC money, you have divided loyalties. Now you've got to choose between the people that gave you money and the people you actually represent. One of the reasons why Democrats have lost in 2014, 2010, and everything except the presidency is we've lost our base. They realize that we're not paying attention to them. We're not demonstrating what I call that unconditional loyalty. I'm about that unconditional loyalty. Some of you know that I'm the oldest of 11. You learn early on how to take care of other people. And all of my life as a bankruptcy lawyer, I've been taking care of people that don't have a friend. The farmer that's being foreclosed, the homeowner that's being foreclosed. And it's about representing people and not the money. Here's two quick fixes that I would do with the U.S. Senate. The first is either as a rule of the Senate or as a law. You, as a senator, cannot take money from people from you or things. Let's break that pay-to-play connection. The second is the ballot. Thanks.
Well, as promised, we come to a time when we will take questions from the audience. Of course, time is of the essence. We want to proceed pretty quickly through this so that we can hear finally the closing remarks from the candidates. So if you do have a burning question, though, please raise your hand and let's stand where you are, and we'll try to accommodate you one way or another.
Thank you. I think we've got three fine candidates. My name is John Nixon. I represent one of the issues that I've done a great deal in economic development and struggling to be able to get used to paying jobs. We're capable of paying $15 an hour and roughly $6 an hour for Fair Act benefits. So I would like to know what your experience is, what kind of companies you may have brought into your areas that can pay this $30,000, $40,000 a year. I don't see them coming to us.
Well, I think the trapdoor is Trans-Pacific Partnership, North American Free Trade Agreement, World Trade Organization. We've got to stop the bleeding. The NAFTA and CAFTA, two of our policy institute, not the South person, $1,800 every single year. We got to stop that. When I was in, we were down to about 2,500 union jobs here. 1974, and we had the school board was on the top. Now it kind of floats along the bottom because we don't have those good-paying jobs where parents can stay home. Service jobs won't get that money back from overseas. Apple alone has nearly $1 trillion sitting overseas. So what they do is they manufacture overseas, they sell to the United States, they export their money to build more factories overseas. It's a bleeding system that our own big corporations are doing. We have to stop that if we're going to lay the base. The other thing we have to do is put that floor out there nationally. A $15 national floor on minimum wage means that people are cutting their throats in the business community and pushing poor people down in our society. If we have a $15 an hour minimum wage, it's going to elevate everything over it. And we know that will go up and up and up. So those are the things we have to do. We've got to fix the system in order to get those jobs that I agree that are not here today.
Good question, John. I first of all agree with Bob that we've got to rewrite the trade agreements. We've got to bring manufacturing back. He's talked about Deere. I've been at the UAW workers meeting last Saturday. You know, they're at a fraction of what they were in the 70s and 80s. We've got to bring those jobs back. Two other things that I would add to that. The first is our crumbling infrastructure. And usually when you hear infrastructure, I don't think roads and bridges, but our water treatment, our sewage treatment, our electric grid, our internet. One of the things in small towns, we don't have reliable internet, so that if we've got the newest, greatest product, we can sell it to around the world, we can sell it to other customers in other states. And so, infrastructure. The third part of this is we're making the transition to wind, we're making the transition to solar. Those are good paying jobs. We need to continue to encourage this shift to renewable. One of the things that I think is the low-hanging fruit is to stop burning coal. Stop burning dirty coal with all the problems. And part of that is we've got to figure out a way to meet what's called the base load. The base load means that no matter whether the wind is blowing and the sun is shining, you flip the switch, the lights come on. That involves building the grid. Those are the jobs that we create here, and they're good paying jobs.
John, thank you for your question. I talked earlier about my belief that we should have a vibrant, full employment economy that works for all Americans. We do that through education, youth employment, infrastructure, clean energy solutions, clean water solutions, raise the minimum wage, and discrimination for workers. In 2008, we were in danger of losing a lot of businesses. There were businesses that went out. We had a better retention rate than most communities in a disaster like that. Make sure we got additional help to bring Penford products back, right? That was in front of the Economic Development Board, and we were in danger of losing that money eligible, so we keep those union jobs and we kept Penford. Up here, I have Mr. Gosler, who I'm pleased to in his efforts to bring jobs to the tech workers. I think that had been passed by government in 2012. We would not have solar energy in 2012. We've got over 1,800 projects built, over $85 million invested, and we now have 900 people working in the solar energy industry in Iowa that didn't exist 5 years ago. So we can do this, but we got to work at it. I'm very pleased with the endorsement from the Iowa Federation of Labor, because the Iowa Federation of Labor agrees with me that we need a vibrant, full employment economy that works for all Americans, and I believe we can do it if we can get Congress to work again.
All right, is it?
Good afternoon. I'm Frank Mason, I'm the Blackhawk County Board of Supervisors. The question I have is, how can the federal government help support the lack of mental health coverage, or not support that, but how can they address the lack of mental health that exists in the state of Iowa that causes our county jails to be providers of mental health?
Very good question. Let me start. One of the things that I've heard repeatedly is we have a lack of psychiatrists and a lack of qualified people. The very first thing the federal government could do would be to provide free college to anybody that qualifies to say, I want to become a psychiatrist. We certainly have to bring more professionals through the pipeline, Frank. The second thing is, I really want to express concern with the legislature and the governor don't get it. I just hear story after story of how there's been cuts, it falls to the county, and the county's don't have resources. I actually represent the Gannon Center, which was based in Dubuque and served Dubuque, Jackson, Clinton County. It went out of business for lack of state funding because the services they were providing were costing them $200,000 more a month than they were getting in reimbursement from the state and the counties. All I can tell you is the federal government can do some of the backfilling. What I'm hearing is that there is federal money that's being scooped by Terry Branstad, where the federal government sends X million of dollars, and people are saying to me, what are you going to do to make the governor leave the money there? All I can say is from the oversight in the Senate that I can ask for more auditors to make sure that the money that is sent to Iowa is actually spent on mental health. It's instead of being diverted to something else.
We have a mental health crisis in Iowa and across this country that we need to address. In Iowa, in 2013, we had the highest level of suicides ever recorded. It was 455. If you look at our prisons today, the rates of mental illness in our prison system is 3 to 10 times the rate in the general population. You have, as you mentioned, Supervisor, we've got county sheriffs who are dealing with, and sheriff's departments that are dealing with the mental health crisis in the jails, and the constant struggle to find beds. And what has happened is neither the federal government nor the branch administration at the state level is interested in funding capacity. Well, guess what? When you're having a mental health crisis, you need capacity. You need a point of entry. There is no stigma. There's no stigma in mental illness. It's the same as any other health condition. If you need help, get help. We need easy points of entry, and then we need capacity. We've got to stop shutting down the beds. We lost 80 beds in Cedar Rapids when the Abbey Center closed. Well, that's taking us in the wrong direction. So we really need to change that. And I think one of the ways we can do it is by reminding people that by the way, 2013 we got an at-risk pool, so counties would have a place to go if they were coming up short on money in the transition. Governor Grant said vetoed it, right? I mean, he does not recognize this as an issue. That's why he unilaterally closed the 2 mental health institutes. He does not see this as a priority. Look, it's a big public safety issue, right? And it's not just because people commit offenses at a higher rate when they have mental health conditions. They're also much more likely to be the victims of crime. So we need to make progress on this. We need to say, points of entry, you've got them. Better coverage, we need to expand the Affordable Care Act or get to a single payer system so we have coverage. We need to increase our capacity, whether that's people or facilities.
I've been in the forefront of some of the mental health issues with veterans, with my Veterans National Recovery Center. And statewide, to quantify it, planners say we should have about 1,600 beds, psych beds. We've probably got less than 600 now with the recent closures at Mount Pleasant and Clarinda. And so the federal guarantee that applies to veterans to be able to go to a place with a bed is gone. In the last 6 years, we went from 90 dedicated psych beds for PTSD veterans, military PTSD veterans, down to 10. And in addition to that, before that, we closed 1,100 beds at Knoxville. And it's been a trend, both from Branstad and its incredible insensitivity, and at the federal level, with closures of capacity, as Senator Hogg mentions. We need to push on this. What's happening statewide has a federal connection. I did a research project at Iowa Veterans Home. We found that they were discriminating against vets 65 and under, which is all your post 9/11 veterans. They can't get in. We actually found a gentleman that said, they told me when I applied and was rejected that I was too young. So what are we doing? We're turning this into an elderly nursing home at Iowa Veterans Home. And we're ignoring the war injuries. The people that fought for you are sleeping under bridges. They're living with family and parents until their family and parents die. And then they're out on the streets too. It's a crime, and we need to stop it.
Well, we're really coming towards the end, and if there isn't a phone question, this will be our last question prior to the closing comment. I don't know whether this will reach, but yeah, at least just one, two, I forgot about
Well, first of all, thank you for coming, because I know you all have busy schedules. My name is Miriam Tyson, and I'm an active Democrat, as you all know. But I would like to address, I would like for you to address the rural decline in Iowa. We know that school districts are consolidating, banks are closing their doors, mediocre access to internet for rural residents, and the access to healthcare resources are few. So, how do you think how can we go about addressing that for rural Iowa?
Miriam, thank you for the question. Thanks for being here today. Great to have you here, and thank you for all your years of leadership. Here's the problem, and I'm not going to blame Senator Grassley for this. I'm just going to make the observation that since he was first elected to the United States Senate in 1980, over 70 counties in Iowa have lost population. Over 70 of Iowa's 99 counties have actually lost population. So this is a major problem. And I believe there is a way forward. I believe it involves a combination of strategies to try to reinvigorate rural communities and rural counties across our state. Number one, I'm a big believer in infrastructure and making infrastructure investments. And I know rural communities were there, and so when I voted for school infrastructure, and I voted for road infrastructure, and I voted for water infrastructure, those were important to help in rural communities. Number two, I believe conservation programs are critical to the revitalization of rural Iowa, because not only does it put people to work immediately working on conservation projects, it also then improves quality of life and attracts people who want to live in those rural communities where there's conservation projects or outdoor recreational opportunities and things like that. We've got to support our schools, and when House Republicans and Governor Brandt said underfund our schools, that hurts rural communities. Fourth, renewable energy. It's critical, whether it's wind, solar, methane digesters, which I've visited those facilities in our state, whether it is advanced biofuels. Those are important for revitalization. And finally, a strong local food economy is really important. My wife and I have been customers of community-supported agriculture. We were a drop site for several years. It's bringing young people and more people into rural communities, and we need to expand those efforts.
I think we've evolved into a leadership crisis in rural America. And one of the reasons is that we've lost several generations of children that have left the rural areas for the cities. And one of the huge reasons they leave, especially the people that we want to lead those communities, is because of student debt. You know, the average wage for a teacher, a beginning teacher in Iowa is $32,000 a year. It's generally less in those rural communities. The average kid graduating from high school is $30,000. The bankers say that in order to pay off the Stafford loan, you need to have an income of $42,000. If those kids move back home to do what they want and do things, they lose. They go bankrupt. And it doesn't just happen to teachers. It happens to all those kids. And what do? They go to Des Moines. They go to Minneapolis. They go to California. And we lose the leadership structure. We need to raise the wages in rural area. And one of the ways to do it is raise it nationally, so there's no cross competition. We need to raise it to $15 an hour to start, just so we can start getting people that can live in those rural areas. There's a lot of cheap housing, but you still need an income to pay off student debt. We also need to look at broadband infrastructure, things like this that will enhance the opportunity, and we need to stop NAFTA and CAFTA. When we passed NAFTA, it destroyed the part-time job. They kept small farmers in business. A lot of small farmers, they would work on the farm, and then the wife would work in the factory, or the husband would work in the factory. That went away with those small town factories, and it helped caused the collapse. We need to reinvigorate manufacturing in rural America in order to stop that decline.
Mary, let me tell you, my little town of Clarence is 1,000 people. In the last few years, I agree with what these gentlemen have said about how we can build it back. But let me add a couple things. Yes, we need internet. I don't have reliable internet. What I would like to see the federal government do is a new REC. We brought electricity to the rural communities. Let's bring internet to the rural communities through the REC. That's number one, so that we're all connected with the world. The other thing is, as Bob talked about, in Iowa, the thing that made us a great state were these little factories where some guy in his welding shop came up with a new invention, whether it be a round beer like Vermeer or Kinsey Manufacturing making grain carts. Suddenly, those communities of Williamsburg and Pella are doing well because this guy's welding shop turned into a product. Two things we need to bring those products to market. The first is we need seed capital. We need to be able to loan money. The hometown banker, he's not interested in you building a factory. We got to find somebody, the federal government's got to put some seed capital in. The other thing is, just because I'm a good welder doesn't make me a good business person. We need some incubators where people learn how to balance the books, learn how to sell. And what you do is you take a guy who's a great welder, a great inventor, and you turn it into a business by having him, or usually his daughter. The daughter's the bookkeeper. Provide them that ideas through the incubator. There is a way back. We've got a history, but we need the federal government to help with the internet, with the seed capital, and with the incubators.
Okay, and finally, we'll have closing remarks. I want to first thank my friend Tom Kessler for minding the time, and luckily he did not have to show his darker side. Of course, I want to thank Pastor Frantz Whitfield for providing this opportunity for us to hear from the candidates and learn more. If you haven't voted yet, of course, you still you have time to vote before June 7th. If you want to, you can go to the county courthouse and vote there. I don't know whether there's any satellite places around here, but you can do that. Or the primary is on June 7th, and so you can vote at that time. And of course, one of the purposes of this gathering was to seek to address the concerns of African Americans and other people of color, and hopefully, therefore, in some kind of way, in your closing remarks, you will refer to that. We'll give you, what, Tom, did you say, about a minute and a half to finish your final remarks, and so we'll begin with whoever is next. All right.
Luck of the draw. I think as I look at my life and my career, there were a couple of great leveling experiences I had. And I, like many Iowans, grew up in a town where there were no blacks. There were no African Americans. The county seat town of Algona, grew up about 20 miles from there. There was one African family. And so I was on a track team in my high school years. And I went over and I sat by their son, Bill Boulders is his name. And I kind of had to look him up and down. And that may sound embarrassing, but that's what happened. Because if you're in a lily white community, you just don't see that. So how did I become acclimatized and sensitized? I think two things: the military and the Waterloo School District. Because I had to, in Waterloo, I had to deal directly with the African American community here. And I'm proud to say I made accomplishments. And you have them today. You have an East Side representative on the Waterloo School Board. Before I started getting involved in advocating on Waterloo School Board politics, you did not have that. And I had to deal with some of the sensitivity issues. There's a language of culture that sometimes can act to allow us to reach out, and sometimes it acts as a wall. And I was able to learn the language. I was able to learn the talk. My wife worked for KO Del Smile down in Des Moines for about a year, shortly after we were married. And so I've been involved in many of the African American communities in the state. I know a little bit about the history of the Buxton Blacks, but I also know about the Illinois Central Gulf workers that came up and populated this black community here in Waterloo. I am committed in my heart to civil rights. I am committed in my heart to equal rights. I am committed to making a better life for all Americans, and that includes African Americans. Thank you.
Let me also thank you, Dr. Pastor Whitfield. I feel like this has been a fruitful forum, and this is an opportunity for you to hear not only the differences, but the things that we agree on. And I appreciate all of you taking time out of Memorial Day weekend to be here. Let me say that one of the things that I've realized in my travel to all 99 counties is we're all in this together. We're all in this together. We're all family. And we need to respect each other. And one of the things about being a person of faith in Mount Carmel is I want to tell you that I recognize the importance of the golden rule. You treat everyone like you would want to be treated. And part of government should be to act that way as well, that everyone be treated equally, not just those with money, not just those with lobbyists. And all of my life, being the oldest of 11, I've stood beside people who have not had a protector or defender or a voice. You know, when the banker is telling you you're no good because you can't repay your farm loan, I stand beside you and say, you're a good person. It's just money. Let me help you save your farm. There have been people who have lost their homes in this crisis. The good news is that all the clients I represented, there was only one case I didn't win. Everybody else still has a roof over their head. My life has been standing with people who don't have a voice, giving them a voice, being their protector and defender. That's the role that I will take the United States Senate. I will be that person standing beside every Iowan, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, and saying, I am with you, I am on your side, I am going to show you unconditional loyalty as your United States Senator. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I've been really excited about being here. We've done a lot of these forums together now, and I wish all the candidates were here. But for me, this is an important part of the process, and so I'm happy to be here. I believe that Iowans are hungry for new leaders who can do the job and who can uplift our democracy. I can do the job. I've been in the Iowa legislature for 14 years. I have been endorsed by over 90 of my current and former Democratic colleagues in the Iowa legislature. And why is that important? Because they have confidence in my ability to do the job. I also have won 5 elections in a row, and we've got Democrats. We have got to nominate somebody who has the potential to win this race. I've won 5 elections in a row. I've replaced Republicans twice. I've done it without running the negative 30-second attack ad, because Iowans are tired of that, and they are looking for people who will uplift our democracy. And I believe in uplifting our democracy. I believe in running a campaign and serving in office in a way where we unite people, and we bring people together, and we lift up the progress that we want to make as a country to build a safe, healthy, peaceful, prosperous, inclusive, and environmentally sustainable future for all Americans, not just some, but for all. So let's unite and let's do that. And I will tell you, I think people are tired of Senator Grassley after his 42 years in Washington, D.C. Now, I admire him for his vote in the Iowa legislature in 1965 for the Iowa Civil Rights Act, right? But you know what? He hasn't been there recently. He voted against the Martin Luther King Day holiday. He's one of 6 remaining people who in the Congress who did that, and he still hasn't said he made a mistake on that. When Steve King said that Muslims can't assimilate, Senator Grassley didn't speak up on that, and we know he's wrong because we have Bosnians here and we have the Mother Mosque in Cedar Rapids. So let's unite our country, let's compete, let's win in 2016. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to our candidates for being here today, and I want to thank each and every one of them for accepting the invitation to be here. One more time, let's give them another hand of applause. One thing that I would like to say to our candidates as a pastor, and I also serve as president of the Iowa Chapter of National Action Network, which is a civil rights, social justice organization. I have to say that whoever wins, whatever candidate who's here today wins, it's very important that you have diversity in your administration. And everyone has to be skilled, but we need to see some diversity. We'd love to see some African Americans in your administration somewhere. Chuck Grassley went into office as a senator in 1981. I was born July 22nd, 1981. He went into office in January. So he's been in office before I was born. And it is time for a fresh face. It's time for fresh ideas. And we need someone who's going to represent us. My church is a very politically involved church, from mayoral candidates all the way up to presidential candidates ever since I became pastor. And one of the things that I noticed about a lot of candidates is a lot of candidates will come and visit us, specifically the African American community, when it's time to run for office. We would like to see you year-round. We want you to come and visit us year-round to let us know that you do care about us and that you guys are concerned about us. So that's just a few words that I wanted to share with you. But I wish there was more of us present today, more African-American representation today. But I thank those who are here and all of you who came to be a part of this debate on today. And this is something that we needed, and we hope to see you guys again soon, and we wish all of you luck. Thank you all so very much. I want to recognize Pat Sachs, who's chairperson of our Black Hawk County Democrats. She's here today. I want to thank her for being here this afternoon with us. And who's here with us also, Black Hawk County Supervisor Board. And we also have Chris Schwartz here today, who's a candidate for supervisor. Candidates, Chris has some literature and science and stuff, and I know some of our candidates here have some literature, so if you would like some, please see them and take some with you. But thank you guys for coming. We have cookies and juice, so help yourself. Thanks a lot.
when you heard the drum, I was unplugging everything because I was static.
You know, we've been vexed by sound issues all along. I can say
Yeah, absolutely.